Welcome to MacroHive Conversations with Bilal Hafiz. MacroHive uses natural and artificial intelligence to educate investors and provide actionable insights for all markets, from rates to FX to commodities. For our latest insights, visit macrohive.com. Before I start my conversation with this episode's guest, I have 3 requests. First, please make sure to subscribe to this podcast show on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. Leave some nice feedback and let your friends know about the show. My second request is that you sign up to our free weekly newsletter that contains market insights and unlocked content. You can sign up for that at macrohive.com. Finally, and my third request is that if you are a professional or institutional investor, do get in touch with me. We have a very high-octane strategy and analytics offering that includes access to our world-class strategy team, market views, AI models, and much, much more. You can email me at bilal@macrohive.com, or you can message me on Bloomberg for more details. Greetings and welcome, Gordon. It's fantastic to have you back on the podcast show.
Delighted to be with you today.
Well, I wanted us to start on manufacturing because it seems to be the big sort of topic for policymakers around the world. In fact, it seems to be in the case for the last 10 years or so. Countries have, in various ways, they're trying to reindustrialize, have industrial policies, more state-led intervention of various kinds. So, I guess there's a fundamental question. What is it about manufacturing that everybody lionizes and has this fetish towards?
Well, the fetish towards manufacturing has a long history. In the US, it goes back to the beginnings of the Industrial Revolution, where we were obsessed with the fact that Britain had all the technology and they wouldn't share it with us. So kind of round one of the fetishization was about productivity growth and innovation. More recently, it's been about manufacturing as a source of good jobs. It's one of the few sectors that pay high wages to folks without a college degree. And so the disappearance of those jobs as manufacturing has shrunk more in employment than in terms of total output has really pinched the middle of the earnings distribution.
And is there something special about manufacturing versus, say, services? I mean, what is it about this that results in higher pay for non-college educated workers?
Well, we have partial explanations. We do know what types of industries are ones that pay their wages, that pay their workers higher wages, controlling for your work history, controlling for education, controlling for other things that might be special about you. Manufacturing stands out. It's not the only one. There are a number of sectors that we think of as good job sectors. Those tend to be sectors in which there are some very big firms that could be evidence of economies of scale. Economies of scale often come along with market dominance. Market dominance comes along with profits. And it's not unusual for companies to share some of those profits, if not explicitly, then implicitly in terms of the contracts and career opportunities they offer their workers. It's true of Google today. It was true of when Henry Ford promised $5 a day in 1914. Similar idea.
And another aspect of manufacturing is its regional impact. So in the UK, if you look at the UK, the north of England has really suffered a lot from deindustrialization, and in the US, you find that places like Michigan and so on. So how does this feed into regional inequality, and is it really, are we really talking about not so much about manufacturing, but more about sort of hollowing out of regions of a given country?
Well, the other thing that's special about manufacturing comes along with those economies of scale. If you have industries in which kind of big firms and in particular big plants dominate, they're going to be located in some places and not others. So you're going to be concentrating those jobs. But there's another feature of it, and that is that buyers and suppliers along manufacturing production chains like to locate near each other. This is something that Alfred Marshall noticed in the Lancashire cotton textile industry, a century and a half ago, looking at the data and looking at that tendency for manufacturing to concentrate near itself. And so what that means is that when one big manufacturing operation shuts down, it can often have ripple effects, leading to shutdowns in industries that are supporting that operation, either upstream or downstream. We're entirely familiar with the clustering that's happening today in places like Silicon Valley, that happened in Hollywood back in the day, the financial industry in New York. watchmaking in the Jura Arc of Switzerland. It's also true in textiles, and it's been true in textiles from Alfred Marshall's day right up to the present.
And yeah, when we talk about manufacturing and the manufacturing decline, at least from a worker perspective in Western economies, there's two contributing factors people tend to focus on. One is globalization and the rise of Asia and China in particular. That has led to kind of de-industrialization of the West. And the other one's automation, that as we get more automation, more robots and so on, then you don't need so many workers. And it's hard sometimes to work out which one's the more important influence than the other. What's your take on that?
Well, it depends on the industry and it depends on the moment in time. If we were just talking about textiles, you think about the loss of textile jobs in the US over the past 4 decades, that's been much more a story of globalization than it has been of technological change. And that's because textiles was a technologically mature industry. It was the hotbed of innovation a century ago. And more recently, it's it's the labor intensive end. And making a t-shirt is hard to get a robot to do. And so t-shirts and shoes and many other parts of apparel and textiles still end up being pretty labor intensive today. Not all of it. There's, some of it has been automated. But we think about what's happened in automobile production. It's definitely some of both. Auto assembly lines today look radically different than they did even in 1990, because robots can put together cars in a way that like humans can, because car parts are inflexible. Robot can pick it up and put it in the same place. It doesn't have the immensely complex geography of a simple t-shirt.
And actually, on the auto sector, I mean, often that's an interesting prism to look at manufacturing. And one thing recently we've seen is just the growth of China, especially in electric vehicles. So if we look at China trade relations, you see there was a phase where Germany was exporting a huge amount of cars into China. Now it seems to flip the other way. I mean, is there something around sort of tipping points here when it comes to the auto sector? We can hark back to the rise of Japan in the 70s and 80s, and now we have the rise of China. Is there some kind of tipping point where the economies of scale kick in? Is this more to do with the EV sector? So it's a specific sort of platform change.
So the auto manufacturing is special within the special manufacturing sector. And that's because those scale economies then interact with just the cost of moving stuff around. And even though it's remarkably cheap to ship automobiles across the world today, it's still a little bit costly. And what that means is it gives you a home market effect. Industry is going to have an advantage being in the very largest market because you save just that little bit on transport costs by having access to local consumers. And that gives you a leg up being able to expand production, fully exploit scale economies to shipping goods worldwide. So that's why worldwide, the US was a natural place for automobile manufacturing to concentrate a century ago. And then after World War II, it was a natural place for auto manufacturing to locate within Europe, in Germany, the largest market. And now China's auto market is expanding more rapidly than any other place in the world. Now, that would ascribe recent events purely to market forces. We know it's not just market forces. And we know that the Chinese government has intervened massively to try and help expand domestic EV production, but they're helped by these other forces, which make China kind of a natural place for a lot of this stuff to happen.
And we'll come back to like state-led capitalism or industrial policy, whatever the word is these days, around that. Now, if we pivot over to the service sector or sort of non-manufacturing jobs, an alternative to trying to rebuild your manufacturing base in a given country is to try to create good non-manufacturing jobs. So how, is there some framework we can use for that, some empirical evidence to say, okay, this is the ingredients you need to create good non-manufacturing jobs?
The first thing is to understand where the good non-manufacturing jobs are located, and they're quite different for college and non-college workers. That hasn't always been true, shockingly enough. If you go back to 1980 and we look at what sector provided the most good jobs to folks with a BA versus folks without a BA, it was manufacturing. Manufacturing paid high wages to lots of folks. Since that time, we've seen, as you've just been discussing, this big reduction in manufacturing as a source of good jobs. It's hit both of those groups pretty equally. Manufacturing was a 40% of the source of good jobs that have put you kind of in the top third of the earnings distribution for college and non-college workers alike in 1980. And for those two groups, it's down to 20% today. What's different for college workers is the creation of all of these fabulous new opportunities in knowledge-intensive services, in finance and consulting, and then all manner of tech. For non-college workers, the biggest area of growth for good jobs has been in the construction trades. And we do a whole lot to make it hard to build housing. And so we have artificially suppressed the creation of good jobs for non-college workers. But there's some other sectors that are coming along. Healthcare increasingly provides lots of good jobs to non-college workers. Think of lab techs. Think of various types of nursing. Now, there's a bunch of crappy jobs in healthcare too, but now more and more of IT is becoming something you can do without a BA degree because it's about installing and maintaining computer and software systems. You don't need to be an electrical engineer to do that. And so the potential for job growth in healthcare and IT for non-college workers is a big deal. And we're just beginning to figure out how to kind of expand that frontier.
And this kind of touches on the so-called sort of college education barrier, which you've referenced in your work. What's the best way of thinking about that?
So economists have been debating, like, what does a college degree mean for a very long time. When Gary Becker came along and developed a theory of human capital in the 1960s, we thought, it's about building your skills. College matters and allows you to earn more because you learn stuff. Michael Spence came along and said, not so fast. Maybe what college is about is just signaling that you're able to get into college. And that's the important thing, that you have these skills and abilities that employers find valuable. We haven't fully reconciled how much of the economic value of a college degree is the Spence signaling story versus the Gary Becker skills story, but both are clearly important. If it is the extent to which, and in either case, we should be able to then break down the skills and say, these are things you need 4 years for. You want to be an electrical engineer? You're going to need a 4-year degree, although it typically takes people 6 years to complete the courses to get there. But if you're going to then manage IT systems, there's a bunch of stuff you can do that you should be able to learn sufficiently within 2 or 3 years. And then the signaling part, we need to find a way for people to verify their credentials and their capabilities short of the very expensive process of spending 4 years at a university.
And so now, if we move to the here and now, in terms of policy tools, of course, over the last year or so with the new U.S. administration, tariffs have become a big policy tool. And other countries like China, deploys them in various different ways, or trade barriers of different kinds. At the same time, people criticize tariffs as being a very blunt tool. And in your work, you've done a lot of work around place-based policies. So can you talk a bit more about kind of this contrasting tariffs versus something like place-based policies?
Sure. And the concept here goes back to an insight that the great Princeton economist Avinash Dixit had or explained to all of us in 1985, and that is the principle of targeting. You will get more of the thing you target. Again, economists come along and telling you things you thought you were pretty sure you already knew. But if you think about tariffs, what are tariffs targeting? They're not targeting the thing we care about. What we care about are good jobs. They're targeting imports. And so tariffs are going to then reduce imports. How do you get from that to good jobs? You have to be, your tariffs might affect production. Production might affect employment. Employment might then affect what non-college workers are doing. But we're already 4 steps removed from the thing the policy was hitting. And that's what makes them imperfect. A lot needs to go right for tariffs to do the thing you want them to do. If we want to target good jobs, then we should have policies that we know are aiming at that target and not one that is 4 aisles down.
And so what examples would there be? So if you have a hollowed out part of your country, would it be you kind of shift, federal funds towards that area, or what are place-based policies?
So this challenge of local place-based policies is a kind of a term of art more among people who don't actually do it. The people who would think of themselves as local economic developers. And it's a profession that goes back to the 1920s. As manufacturing in the South was growing and in smaller towns, and they were trying to pull manufacturing out of Boston and Baltimore and Detroit and Pittsburgh, they turned to folks, many of whom work for the local Chamber of Commerce, which is tell the world that our region is where you want to manufacture textiles. And this group, this set of skills about how you convince other people to invest in your place it's a profession that's been evolving ever since. And we also think of it as primarily being about tax incentives for business investment. But today, the occupation of being a local economic developer does use that one instrument, tax incentives for business. It also means promoting small business development. Most net job growth happens in young, small firms. And so if your young, small firm sector is not vibrant, you're in trouble. It involves skill formation. Or do you have colleges and universities that are helping develop local skills? And that's primarily about what community colleges are doing. And then it also involves just having the right infrastructure. Are you connected to markets? Do you have broadband? Do you have does the rest of the world know about you and what you're up to?
And I mean, are there sort of success stories within the US around this in recent times?
There are many. There are many failures. And if you had to kind of tally up who's winning, kind of the losing side has more entries than the winning side. But what we see are places that were able to go from doing one big thing to another big thing. Everyone's favorite example of this is Pittsburgh, which used to be about steel. And today, the steel remains primarily in the name of the Pittsburgh Steelers National Football League team. But Pittsburgh's economy is about software and healthcare and robotics and other things tech. Now, Pittsburgh, so that's an example of transitions that can occur. It's a terrible example. And the reason it's terrible is Pittsburgh had all this stuff going for it. It's got Carnegie Mellon University, you got the University of Pittsburgh. You have all the things that Carnegie and Mellon as robber barons did to assuage their guilt by investing and creating all of this wonderful social capital. If Pittsburgh couldn't turn itself around, then who could? So then looking to examples that might be more relevant to the rest of America, another one is Grand Rapids, Michigan. Grand Rapids was an early textile manufacturer, an early furniture manufacturer. And furniture manufacturing put you at the center of the bullseye for the China trade shock. What was China really good at as it developed its manufacturing? Initially, it was furniture, textiles, footwear, children, toys, and games, and then it expanded into laptops and cell phones and automobiles and everything else. Grand Rapids had to then figure out what does it do. It was a consortia of local business that came together and realized, okay, we need to invest in the skills of our workers. Local business needs to up its game. We need to make cities and towns in the region, Grand Rapids, Grand Haven, other places, attractive places to live. And we do need to do this working in concert. They created an economic development organization known as The Right Place, formed in, I think, 1986, helped orchestrate much of this. And they had local philanthropic support. It was the DeVos family that invested in the local community and universities and downtown renovations that helped turn the place around. So now with that same philanthropy might make us a little bit nervous Because if that's the entry price for a regional turnaround, there are lots of places that lack them. But America has a strong philanthropic tradition. So if we can share that philanthropic wealth outside of the regions in which those philanthropists are located, then our potential for generating more of those turnarounds is greater than it might appear right now.
And when I listen to you, it sounds very bottom up, the approaches you're talking about. And instead, maybe it's just the way we like to think of these big, grand, top-down policies. So under the Biden administration, we have the Inflation Reduction Act and so on. With President Trump, he's got his various different policies as well. Then with China, we hear about China, the big pushes they do. What do you think about those sorts of industrial policies, very top-down policies? Do they work, or do they end up invariably leading to problems in lots of different ways?
Industrial policy is rife with examples of failure, and economists fixate on those. And it's like the first thing we learn in graduate school: industrial policy is wrong. What we talk about much less, but we've been learning about more recently, are the considerable examples of industrial policy success. In the United States, among the most the best such examples are what happened during and after World War II, where we had to rapidly accelerate the creation of new military technology, and then found all of these applications of those technologies after the fact, and created an innovation ecosystem consisting of universities, federally funded R&D centers, private industry, and then federal government entities like the National Science Foundation and later the National Institutes of Health, which funded much of the basic research that helped that innovation develop and happen. Silicon Valley likes to think of itself as created by a bunch of great men operating on their own after having gone to India and become enlightened. But if you read Chris Miller's Chip Wars about the history of the semiconductor industry, federal government's all over the place. Now, those policies were not about developing industry itself. We had something else in mind: winning World War II, winning the Cold War. And when the government does set out to do industrial policy on its own, there can be problems. And the Biden administration was an example of kind of the best of this and the worst of this when the federal government does industrial policy. The best part was when they were going to do the CHIPS and Science Act. So whatever you think about, should we be investing in semiconductors, should we not? Take as an article of faith that we want to, how should we do it? They had a really impressive model. They said, what are the pitfalls here? It's picking winners and then locating them in states that are politically popular. It's letting the political process take over. So what are we going to do? We're going to approach investing in semiconductors like the private sector would. And they brought in a bunch of talent from private equity investment banks, management consulting, that then approached this as a problem in project finance. And so you had a competitive process to get you funding and then careful auditing. And it worked. It was very impressive. That's the good part. The bad part was those 200 odd people that were the CHIPS and Science team in the Commerce Department are all gone. In modern Washington, it's very possible for there to be continuity in federal policy. And that means we might turn to the federal government for financial support, but orchestration and implementation is going to be a state and local thing. So we want to think of the federal government as creating these permanent institutions that will help us evolve and develop, but they end up being more like the circus. They show up in town. It's this incredible thing. Got elephants and clowns and trapeze artists, but then they're gone. And what do you do after they're gone? And federal government's not built to then replay the circus on a continuing basis in the places that it happens to visit.
And how about, I mean, there's two other kind of developments recently that have really become a big trend in the manufacturing sector. One is the growth of data centers related to AI, and then the other one is this push to increase defense spending around the world. What do you make of those two trends?
Well, if we're thinking of this from the lens of regional industrial development, vastly different options for you. Data centers are going to do nothing for you. They don't create jobs. They suck up energy and water and land. So they're going to displace operations that could be equally power and water intensive, but that create a lot of jobs. So the lure of this is, oh, it's going to expand the tax base. It's going to do this stuff. But what it's really going to do is make you look like San Bernardino. Now, San Bernardino is not a place that's about data centers. It's about distribution centers. But what do distribution centers do? That's where all the trucks that offload stuff that land in the port of Long Beach and the port of Los Angeles then goes to distribution centers in San Bernardino before it goes out to the rest of the United States. You have displaced the ability of San Bernardino to be about anything else. And that's what data centers will do when they come to town. Now, defense spending is very different because now we actually have the possibility of thinking about where that production can be located. And work by economists at the University of at UC Berkeley have documented how that military spending, particularly through defense, acts as a pretty good place-based policy. Government procurement expands good manufacturing jobs. What we don't know is, can we rely on Congress to authorize spending that will go to places that will achieve the dual objectives of meeting our security needs and creating good jobs at the local level? Congress can get, once you put defense plans on the table, Congress can go off the rails a bit in terms of where you meet that. It's got to be in all 50 states. It's got to do these things that just work against good economics.
And at the beginning, when we were talking about manufacturing, we talked about scale and profitability that could be, and that profitability gets passed on, or that success gets passed on in some way to higher wages. But in recent years, what we found is, at least at the aggregate level, there's been an increasingly large profit margin, but the share of labor income of GDP, or whichever measure you want to look at, has been stagnated or declined. So there seems to be a shift in the power of workers relative to the power of capitalists, you could say. What do you think about that? That dynamic, and how does that feed into what we've been talking about?
So you go to Silicon Valley and you listen to people tell the story of what technology has done for America since the early 1980s. You would think we're living in this magical utopia where we get in our driverless cars, we're freed from the drudgery of work, we've got technology solving all of our healthcare problems, and this frees us to fulfill our maximum human potential, which is true for about 0.25% of American workers. For everybody else, what has technology meant? It's helped a lot of folks. It's certainly, we've gotten plenty of advances, but it's also been this massive disruptive influence, which has just replaced workers with machines or with software or with algorithms. And the evidence of that is that absence of this major productivity boom, if all the technology that's come out of Silicon Valley since 1980 is so magical, why does 1870 to 1970 still pull away the last 40 years in terms of productivity growth? So was that new technology primarily about making all of us more productive, or was it about disruption, replacing monopolist number one with monopolist number two? The ledger is looking, it's some of both to be sure, but the disruption story seems to be more compelling when you look at the data.
And when we think about all of this, then from a policy perspective, federal, state, local, how should we think of success? Of what we're talking about. At a simplistic level, economists often think about GDP growth or the unemployment rates like historically low. I mean, in your eyes, what things would you look at to define success?
Well, kind of the last people you want to turn to define success are economists, because our models have, our core models have a single element that determines our utility, our well-being, and that's how much we consume. And so, the economist metric of this is going to lead us astray if we sit with those simplistic models of human flourishing. We want to let kind of people tell us themselves what they want, and they care about economic well-being. Financial stress and financial precarity are enormously stressful. So relieving that precarity is something that brings enormous gains to folks at a change in income, which wouldn't mean that much at all to somebody who's earning $150,000 a year. So one is we have to think about where that income growth is going and the security and sense of stability it provides for lower end of the income distribution versus higher ends of the income distribution. But then another of this comes that thinking about human development in a more complete way, which is how we live. We live in a manner in which we spend lots of time investing in relationships, in things we do outside of work, in ways in which we engage with neighbors and the community, stuff we have a terrible time measuring. But when you talk to the organizations that are doing the worker training in places that have seen this massive job loss, they care about earnings for folks. They care about having a job, but they also care about these other aspects of human development. Do you have a driver's license? Are you staying? Are you taking care of your family, taking care of your kids? Are you resolving the barriers that are holding you back in life? And for we haven't focused on this stuff because it is so devilishly hard to measure. But this is where kind of the applications of AI are really, really impressive. A lot of our metrics of how we're doing are encoded in text we might post online, text people might use to evaluate us in a job setting, in an application setting. And we're now kind of using access to that text and the power of AI to understand the more ephemeral parts of how we're doing as people. And the ephemeral part is really important for understanding just how happy we are as individuals.
Now, I just want to round off with a final question, which was around your areas of focus right now. I mean, you've obviously written lots on this subject before, books as well. At the moment, what's your big, hairy project that you're working on?
It's about community colleges, and so if you look back and the work we've been doing on the China trade shock, and then just the decline of manufacturing in general. We failed people and places in a couple of respects. One is we didn't provide the assistance they needed right at the moment jobs were being lost. That's not that hard to correct. That's more generous unemployment insurance and kind of strategic investments in worker training. The thornier issues are how to get people repositioned in the labor market quickly from the thing they were doing, machine operator in a manufacturing factory, to something new. And community colleges are at the front lines of that transition.
And just for the benefit of our non-US audience, what is a community college?
A community college is a public 2-year institution that provides career and technical education. Now, that layer of training exists in almost every economy today. It exists in Mexico. In Mexico, though, it exists at the high school level. It's occupational training that you would switch into after grade 10. Something similar exists in the UK context and in the German context. These occupational, vocational tracks get knocked a lot because you're tracking people and so forth. One thing is about what we're doing to 16-year-olds. The other is about what we're doing for 26 and 36-year-olds who've lost their jobs and need to reposition. So think of this as how do we design career and technical education that allows people to quickly redeploy themselves into doing a new thing after the thing they thought they were going to be doing goes away. We have examples of success. Unfortunately, those examples are Denmark. Denmark's wonderful, happiest place on earth.
It's always Denmark.
Be like Denmark? I don't know. But this promise of helping labor redeploy and helping people redefine themselves to me is one of the most crucial issues we face today. And those public 2-year colleges are everywhere in the United States. There's 1,400 of them. And so they exist. They're trying to do the right thing. They're under-resourced, and their potential to help us play a role in reducing joblessness for folks without a BA degree seems to be pretty high.
That's fantastic. I mean, we've covered a lot of ground. What's the best way for people to follow your work and connect with you?
So everything we do is on our Reimagining the Economy website. And then also on my own personal website, Gordon Hanson. There's just not many Gordon Hansons in the world. So if you Google me, you'll find me. And the short form stuff we're doing, podcast videos, op-eds are all there, but also the longer form work. We have, and something I'm happy to share with your listeners, is a data visualization platform that allows you to go in and look at what's happening in local labor markets in the United States in terms of wages, employment, joblessness, what's happening in terms of where government is investing money, be it community colleges, food stamps, support for small business. So we're trying to put data resources in the hands of folks that will allow them to do some of this and empower them to do that analysis themselves. And I will throw that in chat right now.
Great.
So that you share that.
Yeah, I'll include all of these links in our show notes as well. So that'll be very, very helpful. I mean, that's quite a useful resource. I don't think I've come across anything like that before.
This is a beta version. We haven't, it's not gone fully live yet.
Okay.
But it's semi-live.
Yeah.
But we'll be going fully live a little bit later this year.
Great. Okay. Well, with that, thanks a lot. It's fantastic speaking to you, and good luck with all of this work that you're doing.
Thank you, Bilal. It's been great to talk to you again, and thanks for your interest in what we're up to.
Thanks for listening to this episode. Please subscribe to the podcast show on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. Leave a 5-star rating, a nice comment, and let other people know about the show. We'll be very, very grateful. And of course, sign up for our free newsletter at macrohive.com. And this podcast is not intended to be investment research, nor does it constitute financial, economic, legal, tax, or accounting advice. This podcast is provided for information purposes only and does not constitute an offer or solicitation to purchase or sell any financial instruments. The contents of this podcast are not based on your individual circumstances and should not be relied upon as an assessment of suitability for you of a particular product, security, or transaction. The information in this podcast is based on generally available information and although obtained from sources believed by MacroHive to be reliable, its accuracy and completeness are not guaranteed. Past performance is not guarantee or indication of future results. Third-party opinions expressed in this podcast are solely those of the speaker and do not represent the views of MacroHive, BGC Group, or any of its affiliates. And this podcast may not be copied or distributed in whole or in part without the express written consent of MacroHive. All rights are reserved.